Hi guys, Virginia here and I'm back with another 12x12 process video for you today. This one's for the Kitaholic Kits design team and I'm using the August kits. This will be my first layout, well technically my third. I did a Facebook Live last Friday and created two layouts already with it, but this is my first one for YouTube. So what I'm doing is gessoing my background. I had an idea to feature these Kaisercraft flowers and the Vicky Boot and acrylic paints, and it kind of festered. Is festered the right word? The idea grew in my head for a couple of days, and it kind of evolved into this layout. Okay, so I'm just going to trim down my photos. My photos I have put into an app called ColourPop, and I've kind of edited them so that the top half is black and white and then the bottom is full colour and then it's kind of fading in the centre. And the idea was to have basically the colour draining out of the flowers and the photo, if that makes sense. It looked awesome in my head. I'm still in two minds whether I am in love with the end result. I think the paints, to me, look much brighter in the pottles than they actually are on paper. The dark pink turns out a bit red, so that's kind of throwing me. It's growing on me, the end result. And as I watched it back through editing it, I like it, but I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinion on the layout. So anyway, I'm fluffing around with the flowers, trying to decide how I want them set up on the page. And I wanted a big cluster, but I just wasn't sure how I wanted to arrange them. I wanted to look a little bit haphazard. I didn't want it to be too uniform and even, and I settled on this. So here I am pulling out the paints. They look really bright in the packaging, but when they dry, again, they go a bit darker. I decided to use one of these My Mind's Eye acrylic words for my title, and that gives me the opportunity to bring a bit of gold onto the page. You all know I love my gold, so I'm just kind of deciding where I want to place that word on the page. Okay, I've also adhered my photos together and put a bit of adhesive foam behind them. Now I'm just going to mark with a pencil where my flowers end up so I know where I want the paint to go. I'm going to adhere down my photo with some ATG tape and a bit of glue. Just pop that in place, and that gives me a good starting point because I'm going to take all these flowers off and start with the acrylic paint. Okay, so I'm just going to move them out of the way and get out my little craft mat, and I'm just going to pop a little daub of the lime green. I'm going to start with that colour, and I'm going to add a ton of water to it. I want to get it really fluid so that it'll flow down the page. It takes a bit of work in it. I don't want too much water so that it's not opaque and it's like watercolour. I still want it to be very thick and luscious on the page, if that makes sense. So I'm just starting where I know that first flower is going to be, and then we're going dripping and just adding paper. Now, a good way to get your drips where you want them to go is to kind of put a blob and then just pull down a little bit with your paintbrush, and that gives a direction for the paint to flow when you tilt the page up. So I'm sorry that you can't see it too great, but you can kind of see it. I'm just taking a big scoop of paint and just kind of blobbing it in that main section and then letting it fall down those drips. Okay, so onto the second colour, this lovely aqua bluey colour. Again, adding a lot of water, getting it really fluid, but trying to maintain its acrylic paint-like texture or opacity. Okay, so I'm going to start there. So I'm kind of doing half and half with the blue and green, and then the other half will be the pink. So again, just pulling. You can see I just painted down a little bit, and now I'm blobbing the colour, putting a ton in there, and just giving that painted direction to fall down the page. It's just pretty much scooping it up and putting it on. That first drop is I've added too much water, so I will pull some paint down and tidy that up shortly. Another drip. Takes a while, a bit of patience. There we go. Just adding, scooping it up, putting it on. Pretty simple process. Just about done. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that, and I'm just going to dry it lightly with my heat tool. I did find if you held the heat gun in place too long, you'll crack the paint. So I dried it enough to kind of, just so that it would stop running. I didn't want those drips to go anymore in the green and the blue. So, yeah. Now I've added too much water to that one. You can see it's very watercolour-like. So I'm just adding a bit more acrylic paint, and then I'm going to start on the darker pink. It looks very, very pink in video, but in real life it looks quite red, which is, I think, what threw me a bit. So there we go. I'm starting my little drips. I'm going to have 4, and I'm just scooping that paint up and just helping it along the way. And I accidentally got a blob in the bottom, but that's okay. I can fix that up later. I will wipe it off with a paper towel, and then I'll just go over it with some white gesso a couple of times, and it will disappear. Okay, so again, just scooping, adding the paint to the top, letting it drip. I don't make you watch me do all 4 colours. I think you kind of get the gist by now. Okay, so I've dried that darker pink, and I've done the lighter pink as well. Gone ahead and finished that off, and I'm going to put my flowers back in place. So it's not, the paint isn't completely dry. I'm just being careful. I didn't want to dry it too much with the heat gun, because again it'll bubble and crack. So now I'm just going to put my flowers in place. So I'm just kind of situating them where I like them, and I'm going to glue them down just with some Scotch tacky glue. That'll be fine. It will dry eventually. I'm putting quite a bit of glue to make sure, and I think the wetness of the acrylic paint will help to ensure that those flowers stay stuck as well when that dries. So I'm just putting the last few in place. Just going to glue them down. I think the flowers, another thing that's kind of thrown me as well, is the flowers are a lot larger than I had remembered. All of this was kind of done in my head. I do this quite often. Design layouts in my head, and when I get to the products I find things are a little bit different, so I have to kind of change my design. But the flowers were a lot larger than I remembered, so I'm trying to have to work with that. I'm just tidying up some of the bits and the drips where the paint wasn't as opaque as I would have liked it, so I'm just adding a bit more just to make sure it's nice and thick. And I'm just putting a coat of gesso on that little mistake down the bottom, tidying that up, and I will do another coat later on just to make sure you can't see it. Okay, so now I'm going to get it stuck into the flowers. So I'm not going to paint the flowers entirely. I'm doing it quite haphazardly. I'm not completely covering them. I want it to feel like the flowers once were completely full of colour, but it's kind of dripping away from them. And I think I was quite successful in that. The flowers look really cool in my mind. So I'm just adding bits. I like tucking the colour right in and into the inside of the flower, and leaving kind of, I guess, the top section of the flowers quite white. So I've just done the light pink, now I do the blue. And these flowers were so easy to paint, they completely soaked up the colour beautifully, so that was good. Just finishing off that blue. And I thought I had finished, but realised I hadn't quite with the blue, so I'm just going to do a little bit partially blue on that other flower, and then I'm going to go and do the lime green. So pretty simple process. I think the more that I'm looking at it now, I do like it. It's just different than what was in my head. It's growing on me. I really like the idea, and I think it could definitely be improved upon. maybe at a later stage. But yeah, so now I'm going to work on my title. Placing that, I decided just kind of to the centre of those flowers, a little pop of gold. So I've got some gold Liquitex ink. This and the white cardstock is the only thing that I pull out of my stash. So I chose this because it's a very fluid ink and I knew I wouldn't have to water it down or anything. So I'm just going to do a few little drips of the gold acrylic ink, so as if that's coming out of the title. So just dripping that down the page. Sorry you can't see it very well. But it's the same process as the acrylic paint, but I'm kind of tucking the starting point underneath the flower so that you can't see it. And just basically picking it up, putting it on the page and letting it drip. Takes a wee while. Okay. A few little splatters because I just couldn't help myself. And wipe any messy bits. A few more splatters. Just to break up the whiteness on the page. I'm going to put my word back. And I'm kind of situating it where, because there's a little dot for the eye in bliss, so I'm situating it where I can stick that little dot on one of the flowers quite comfortably. So that was a good motivation on where to put that word as well. Just put my little dot, and I decided to add one little hearts as well. So I just pop that down the bottom. Okay, so all cleaned up. And I felt like it needed just a little bit something more. So I'm just going to add a touch of gold, just some tiny little bits on just the tips of a few of the petals, just to add a bit of interest, break up the plainness, and to bring in a bit more gold, of course. But yeah, just dotting that around. I really like that little touch. So, and even on some of the white leaves. And then after that, that'll be it for my layout. So I hope you enjoyed the process. Let me know whether you think this was successful or unsuccessful. Yeah, until next time. Bye, guys.